Welcome back, everybody, to some Unified Premier action here for our final play day we have available for you. And it's a bit of a matchup for the ages, so to say, isn't it, Stick? And, well, we're going to see how it goes down. My name's Infernosis, joined here by my great friend Sticula, and we've got ourselves a great match. Stick, why don't you tell us a little bit about these two teams?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're here at the end of the regular season and even into the postseason play. The grand finals is upon us, and we've got two teams who've had a couple of shuffles back and forward through group play, but finally arrive here at the culmination to decide who the bulk of our $2,000 prize is going to go towards. For those of you who have been a little active on the Twitter space and were here yesterday, unfortunately, I was absent actually on a little adventure out of town, but there was a new news flash. We've had a roster move, and Negative IQ, who were formerly known as Aerial Arise, have now had another roster change and have been picked up by the organization known as Team Assault. So sure to be pretty exciting. They have a huge amount of potential, I really think, and I'm excited to see how they will play here in the best of five infinite overtime space.
Yeah, obviously the finals are a bit of a different beast, so to say, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see what exactly might unfold. And I guess the biggest starter to that is to see what map we're exactly playing on. So we'll jump right over to the map band screen, take a look at maybe what we're playing today, what the teams weren't comfortable with, and really deep dive what necessarily goes forward. Obviously with a best of five, band two, and then straight pick phase straight through the decider. Mystic gets their first ban, followed by, of course, this new Team Assault. And we'll see what they're going to go forward. Mystic's first ban, in fact, will be, as it comes up just shortly, I would assume, possibly.
It'll come up in a bit,
Yeah,
but
we,
as you
we
can
got
see
it.
here with the way that the format works is you have one chance to ban the map you absolutely do not want to play on. For Mystic here, they are going to elect to remove Oregon, which I imagine is probably a big sigh from all of us in chat, that pressure release that we will not have to go to the so often treaded map, and it's Cafe Dostoevsky as the follow-up. Team Assault. It is a bit surprising to me, honestly, Scott, that they banned this map. I've had a lot of really good memories, really positive results from JJ Blastful, the captain of Assault here. He really loves Cafe, which is odd. Maybe they're going away from it. Maybe there's something with the map that they don't like, or maybe they know something a little bit more about Mystic that I'm not aware of that makes Cafe a bit of a scary prophecy. But now we'll step into the picks. As far as this first one here from Mystic, I honestly don't know too much what I would expect. I don't think it's going to be too outlandish, probably nothing crazy. We'll get to that in the latter stages because you want to come into this inaugural selection with a map that you know is going to be comfortable. You want to kick off the map veto stage and the series as a whole with a place that you know you have solid form on. That'll be Clubhouse.
Yeah, immediately followed up by Coastline. And of course, the Coastline map changes did go through. The map's not out of the pool. So obviously, there are some different beasts, some different locations that have changed. Nothing too large in the long run. But then immediately after that, what we'll be picking up is Villa. And finally, Team Assault will get their last pick before it ultimately goes down to the decider. And Stick, I'm going to go ahead and say I think the reason why we're seeing Cafe taken out as Chalet and Coastline go up on the board is because I think Team Assault knows that Mystic has a bunch of gunners on their roster. Poison, Eddie, Tone, Spiff, Ashen, the five we'll be seeing playing tonight. Cafe's typically been a map that's kind of starting to swing towards an attacker's favor. It's starting to be more categorically attacker favorited. Defense is having a hard time lasting on any objective that is not that third floor, and it's just become an entirely different map in that respect. It's the same way you talk about CCTV when it comes down to Clubhouse. That objective used to be entirely defensive favored, and it's kind of flipped. Attackers have been sweeping that objective in an almost completely lopsided affair. It's pretty rare to see a team win that or lose that on the defense, I should say. And I think that's kind of what Cafe is starting to fall into, that stupor, that downward angle of defensive presence, and the attacks are just starting to come forward. I don't think it's a bad decision. I think Team Assault made the right one here. I do like the fact that Chalet has a chance to be played. I love that map. It's my favorite map in the game, and I'm just looking for any opportunity to cast it.
Well, I'll actually sort of back you up on that point as well. I mentioned the roster moves that went on with Team Assault, now formerly known as Negative IQ. There has been one sort of minor change over on the Mystic side. You probably are familiar with the name. They were formerly Team Mystic, but there's sort of kind of intermission period here. It's just Mystic. This is a pug roster. And so Cafe can have some problems. Very tall map. You have to clear it out. It can be pretty difficult for teams to try to go with that Jackal, with your Nomad, with your flank drones to make sure you fully collapse upon the entirety of that staged roam. And JJ Blast, I'm sorry, JJ. Sometimes you roam clear, and playing against more aggressive teams doesn't go well for him on a map like Cafe. So I expect that in some respects. But then you have the Coastline pick, which could itself cause a couple of issues. And I'm actually really glad that we have first Clubhouse and then Coast, because I haven't gotten a chance to cast either of these maps since the new changes just dropped in the patch.
Well, pretty interesting. I actually am thoroughly enjoying what they do. I think we're just about ready to go ahead and walk us on into this map and see Nessa how Clubhouse is going to fare. I'm assuming you know the changes that did go forward for this map stick. Obviously, big ones, that construction wall, a little thinner. Obviously, have some big problems when it comes to Coastline itself. You no longer can go inside of walk-in from kitchen service. You actually have to step all the way through to kitchen service to plant. That did not actually happen last Tuesday when I cast it with John. Unfortunately, that team just completely did not plant the objective and then complained the game was broken at the end of it when they obviously didn't read the patch notes or do anything in preparation. I will give some leeway.
Ooh.
All right, I will give some leeway because it was the day of the patch, so I will give that a little bit of leeway. But I don't necessarily think it's enough of an excuse. It's been there for a while in the TTS. There's plenty to work with, and I don't think either of these teams are going to make those minute mistakes, especially with the fact that the prize pool is on the line, of course, and that's something you don't want to try and contend with. 1,200 to first, 500 to second, huge difference between them. Don't want to lose out.
Oh, for sure. And, if you hadn't scrimmed on the test server, you're kind of doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. You want to be prepared for all of the changes that have come to the front of the new patch. And so I would hope that both teams are prepared now. With the amount of time that you see Mystic members specifically playing ranked, you would think they've probably had a couple of chances to test out the new features coming to Club and Coastline, and maybe they've had a shot to play that new bank map that has actually been added and reworked to the competitive pool at current. We have Consulate being played out as the just decider in this series, which is fun. That might be, one of the last opportunities to see that map get played in a competitive environment such as this over here in Unified. But another point that I wanted to bring up as well, you might have seen it, before we started talking at the start of the broadcast itself, and that would have been the bracket. Both Mystic and Team Assault here on the field are coming out as representatives of the Raven Shield Conference. Rogue Spear not go too great for them inside of the playoff runs. Their only victory came, I believe, in that Chess Club Revenge Nation situation, which was such a tough game to be placed into. So, you see that happen. And coming off the back of that, no more wins in the semifinals for Raven Shield. They were knocked out, or Rogue Spear were knocked out. That's getting a little confusing with two of those names starting with R. And now we have the final. It's the 1 seed and the 2 seed, both representatives of Raven here in the grand finals.
And obviously, we'll talk a little bit of the bans that went forward. We're going to see, obviously, we have Hibana taken out. Nothing shocking for Clubhouse. What is shocking is seeing Maverick taken out instead of your go-to Thatcher ban. That's going to turn this matchup on its head, because obviously, you can see on this attacking side, Spiff is bringing that Thatcher to the table, and with that left unbanned, it's going to leave a lot of room for this Mystic team to, I guess, really start to punish Team Assault for not going ahead and setting themselves up for defensive success, because that Thatcher, those EMPs, completely remove any ability for a defensive presence to play. But I believe we're just going to see a normalized SSG-style roam on this map, especially on this basement hold. They're not too worried about defending or denying a hard breach attempt. Possibly we'll see an attempting denial when it comes to that kitchen hatch. And usually you do see a Hibana go for that in the process, hence why she is banned. And unfortunately, you usually see an impact spam to try and deal with it. Already, all but one of the impacts for Team Assault have been expunged. They're destroying the hatches already. The one inside main bar has already been taken out. They're looking to leave it a little bit open. The drop down into Memo is going to be a little bit, I guess, harder to defend, and it won't slow down Mystic maybe as much as they want, but they went for that decision, and I'm afraid they're going to have to sleep in the bed they set up.
Hopefully they've at least added a couple of pillows there so the experience is comfortable. But Mystic with Thatcher is a scary prospect. They can really start to up the ante and be very specific the way that they go for their clear. But the first obstacle they'll encounter will prove to be a fairly lethal one there. As you lose out on your Iana, which will reduce the opportunities to drone things out, and that could cause a bit of a slowing effect, not to mention the fact that you also have Vigil as well, Maxilli, and cause a situation where he's kind of distracting members, and you see that effect of the Vigil. You don't quite know what floor he's on. But another pickup is Gunner will expand to 2, now taking out the Buck as well, and I do believe here, Scott, Eddie didn't get inside kitchen to start the vertical.
I don't think so either at this point. In all honesty, it's a little strange to me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around a lot of what's going on here because obviously with Mystic losing Eddie and Tones at the very beginning, their entire assault has to be changed by the forefront. I mean, you do see Spiff has finally stepped in from Jacuzzi's side, has Hatch inside Gym Bedroom, but unfortunately Ashen will be taken out by Asian, and it's a 2v5. Last two left standing, your Thermite player of Poison, who does manage to find one, immediately refragged back with a 3k Gunner that is Gunner, and unfortunately now it's just Poison left standing. Only has one exothermic charge still available, and probably not a very good chance of actually dealing with this presence that's going forward, as everything ultimately begins to wrap up as Felt comes from the inside of Bar, sweeps towards the corner of Stock, and just shoots through the soft wall that he was attempting to use himself, and that round ultimately fizzles out for Mystic and is successful for Team Assault.
That was really weird. I mean, they were so slow with the way that they went about that, and the roam caused many issues. Maybe you'll think back to that setup and they drop perhaps the Iana, step in with a Jackal. I think could be an advisable decision given how many issues they face. Gunner, a lot of times we talk about him as this leadership figure, but the big part of his ability to IGL actually comes from the way that he reads the offense or the defense in any given scenario, and that allows him to perform really at an outstanding level as a roamer, constantly, working your way around, spotting those areas where the offense leaves gaps, leaves chinks in their armor, and he works his way in for two early starting picks. Mystic never recovered.
Yeah, obviously the recovery was really lackluster. Mystic were unable to, I guess, survive the assault that Team Assault brought to the table. And that's probably a pun I'll use a million times because if you're going to bring a name like that, I'm going to crack jokes about it in the process. But ultimately, I think it could have just been the presence of that really extended roam. I mean, obviously, when you're defending basement site, you can go for that turtle strategy, and it technically can be fruitful, but when you leave Thatcher on the board, there's just no chance you're going to be able to hold on for long enough to make a difference. Instead, play that extended roam, play that style, and use it to your advantage, and they did exactly that. Team Assault looked good. Mystic failed to make any sort of performance going forward, only finding one kill, even though that one was immediately refragged back. And now, I guess Mystic will have their chance to attack. The objective I brought up earlier, Sticula, where we saw where you see attackers typically start winning this objective, this CCTV and cash room hold. It's starting to favor attacking teams, and I think with the fact that Thatcher is up on the board, it's just going to be even more one-sided in favor of attackers. It's really going to come down to how well can Team Assault play.
Hard reaching progress, starting to come to the forefront a little bit more. The bandit trick being attempted here, which is not the most common thing to take down Gunner. Down by Spiff. I'm not sure where he fell through, but losing your Maestro there is never going to be. Fusion not yet kicked off from the wall. It can be a bit tricky to attempt this. You don't have someone like a Maverick, but Ashen is cooking a frag grenade, and as lead down the bandit battery, and even the extra perfect doesn't get stopped, it's successful, and that'll mean the ball being open, help up punishing a bit of damage from Poison out on the rappel, as this round looks to be a bit of an opposite setup. First time around.
Obviously a big difference with Team Assault failing. Nitro will be tossed. This one will be successful as it does go ahead and take out Poison, but JT will be immediately refragged back by Eddie, who just decides to push forward. Maxley jumps out Construction window, giving away his presence, but still is alive and well in Construction. Needs to face one forward behind sidebar. Does tag Spiff's leg, who does narrowly make their escape to the backside of Cashew, but one player lying prone. That's Eddie, who already found JJ and will finish their assault onto Maxley, and will manage to find a successful round presence. Nothing too shocking, Sticula to see. Calling it once again, attackers just favorited so heavily on that map. Rushing works, taking and getting rid of those hard walls, obviously with great assistance with that Thatcher and the garage walls themselves. It's all she wrote, Sticula. It's nothing too shocking in that regard, but what may be shocking is whether or not we see a repeat on that objective, or if we'll see the tertiary objective of Master Bedroom and Gym.
Yeah, I think there's space for both of those options, but with how just brutal and effective the offense were, probably would be good to add a little bit of extra space, go down to the basement side, and then maybe, take a bit of extra time to actually think through that one.
I think we're back into it. Yeah, we are doing a repeat, unfortunately, and I have it bound to my soundboard. I'm not going to use it, though. My go-to saying, Sticula, of don't play the same objective twice. It breeds a level of complacency that just doesn't belong in the game of R6. I say it as many times as possible because, quite frankly, I can say it with my eyes closed at this point, or my ears closed, whichever one. I could probably say it with my mouth closed. It's just floating out of my body at this point. I say it way too often, but I don't like seeing a repeat. And with how lopsided, like you said, Mystic's attack was on that objective, I think they probably should have gone for the tertiary objective. They probably should have played Master Bedroom and Gym and worked that, because you can still hold cash, which was probably their most successful part of defense for Team Assault. Unfortunately, the rush from Eddie was just too much to deal with, and that's kind of what ultimately flipped the tide in favor of this Mystic attack. Unfortunately, I think Sticula is also facing mic problems with VMix.
I am doing a bit of juggling over here, but we're gonna go with it on the fly. Hopefully that's a little bit better for those of you watching. Apologies. I know we've had a bit of a delay to the stream and we're...
It's not... Oh, you Sticula, when in VMix, if you go to your browser in the top right corner, you'll see a little webcam in the actual, browser section where it's like www. There's a webcam on the far right side. If you click on that and then hit manage, you can change your microphone there. So, but, all right, a 5v5, obviously, Mystic are still alive and well. This is something that may be shocking for anything when it comes to the extended roam for Team Assault, but Tones is going to dish out some damage early, but somehow Gunner still wins that fight and even decides to get dirty in the chat as well, dropping an LOL. Tones still nice, saying nice shot, but Ashen's immediately there in the refrag and then dropping his own little bit of EM immediately afterwards, and this 4v4 officially in effect. You do have a dangerous position now as JJ is attempting to push construction window. Very wary of a player that could be outside that southern subroof, but currently, as of this current moment, it looks to be that Team Assault are doing a good job of staying live in the actual turtle and maintaining themselves a position of dominance. That may just be taken away as Mystic are looking to not instead push from that eastern suburb and take the CCTV hard wall, but instead push construction and maybe work from that construction side. All right, so at this point, obviously, Asian still holding with the MP7. Very dangerous position. One player lying prone. Will go for the unfortunate bandit trick, but Eddie's down below with the buckshot, taking it out with the skeleton key and removing Asian from the situation, making sure that he will be sent to the afterlife as the exothermic charge does officially go off, and that shorter construction hard wall maintaining themselves a sightline now into money. Spiff finds one with the L85A2 straight to JJ, and a 4v2 now in effect as Maxley has to make the long roam from basement all the way from secret back to the objective. Does find one, but it doesn't last long enough. He's taken out immediately in return on a refrag. Does find Ashen, and now Maxley is able to find one of his own. Poison and Maxley in a 1v1 situation. One player on red stairs. Poison is completely aware to a degree of that player's position. Will start to put the lunchbox down, but there may not be time to eat up just yet as Maxley begins the crouching position, steps up and finds the kill. Will deny the place and will get the defuse in the process. And we will see Mystic lose this CCTV objective and Team Assault go up 2-1. Unfortunate, though, for Team Assault, though, as it kind of came down to a situation of 1v1 that they necessarily don't want in that position. With Mystic having a position of dominance in the last round prior in round 2, and then in round 3, winning a lot of the engagements up until we saw, I believe it was Felt, who won an engagement that I don't think anyone was necessarily anticipating. Even the opposing team on Mystic were like, excuse me, how did this happen? As you did see himself get one towards construction doorway, turn towards an outside window in the southern suburb, and still find one through CCTV window. It's not something you necessarily would anticipate them finding the two-piece, but at the same time, I believe we had seen Mystic manage to win that last match. I think it was Mystic. I don't actually remember. Maybe it was Chess Club. I can't remember who it was. They won to get into the finals, and it was off a play on Clubhouse for CCTV where the defensive player killed one inside of, obviously killed one in construction doorway as they were lying prone. There was one on eastern suburb lying prone, took them out as well, and then walked up and killed a player that was forced to go for the plant because time was running out. And that's ultimately where that 30-second meta of R6 tends to fizzle out and fail. And I think Ubisoft has been, painfully aware of that meta for a little bit too long, and has been doing a lot of things necessary to try and remove it if they could, but a lot of things haven't necessarily worked out for them, and I think things are starting to look a little bit better with that 30-second meta taking a back seat, and obviously with the buffs and nerfs that came to a lot of operators in the newest patch, things are starting to look a little bit more favored towards a long con attempted assault, but still needing to be quick enough to get rid of that roaming phase. And that's why you see on maps like Coastline where roaming is so powerful. That's why you still see Jackal bans. Bans haven't changed whatsoever for that. But I'm starting to think for other maps, we'll probably still see some standard bans like Thatcher, but I think we'll start to see some Valkyrie no longer getting banned out. And you'll probably see them try to pick up something else. Obviously, Mute's no longer going to get banned. Not exactly the strongest operator with that unfortunate Mute Jammer nerf that did come through. And yes, it is strong enough to necessarily stop a hard wall, but it's not going to be enough to stop all of the hard walls because it cannot do an entire wall in the process. You can use Hibana X-Kairos pellets on the top corners, get some sightlines down below, and work in that direction. Obviously, you can just throw a Thatcher EMP, so it doesn't really matter what the team Assault Defense brings to the table, but ultimately, they're going to get the Jacuzzi wall, give them a soft opening with that pocket hard breach, and then they're going to start to try and clear maybe VIP because they do have entrance to hatch. Eddie's going to go ahead and drop it with a skeleton key, then drop down to kitchen, giving away the audio cue to Team Assault to make Felt wary on his feet, but not necessarily wary enough to try and contend against that. May just try to drop down to the basement and try to turtle up. As you can see, a lot of Team Assault is beginning to make their way back down, trying to stay alive. That's where we saw them fall apart in round 2. They had a little bit of an extended roam, and they had themselves set up for I guess a minute amount of success, but unfortunately it kind of fizzled out. They had found one, immediately refragged, a second one had dropped immediately after that. They were not able to keep their players alive, and that's starting to be the weak link for Team Assault if we see that continue to go forward. They've done a good job in this round, already a minute and 20 seconds left in the round, where they still don't necessarily, they still haven't lost anybody, and they look very good in the process. They're now able to turtle. They've got strong weapons. Obviously the T5 SMG on your Legion main doesn't have the 1.5 anymore. Good reason, even though I hate that fact, but it's still an extremely strong weapon. Nitro detonated from below, trying to catch one player off inside kitchen. Ashen's getting body blocked by a teammate, dropped now to 1 HP in a very dangerous spot, but he will still find one in the process. Goddard takes out Poison. Ashen on a refrag, still 1 HP, but still has that dream. Has to pick up the lunchbox in kitchen, kind of ironic in the process, but Felt is on the prowl. Center stairs, main steps towards that second floor. Max is going to drop from construction. Hatch finds one. Asian finds his own into Eddie. And Felt finally just pounces on Spiff and sets up as Ashen is the last man standing. A sliver of HP and essentially an entire round to clutch up with only 25 seconds remaining. It's not going to happen as Asian, just standing on top of boxes, finds it through the hatch and completely cleans up this round in favor of the defense. Team Assault once again. And I'm sorry to say it to you, unfortunately, with Team Assault being 3-1 up now, Mystic kind of have a lot on their plate. And yes, it is a game that is typically considered defensive favorited, and attackers kind of have that major flaw, but we'll finally be able to see the tertiary objective be brought forward, Gym and Master Bedroom, and hopefully Team Assault can hold on for a little bit longer. But I think Mystic is definitely in a period of time right now where they're going to need to adapt to what they're bringing to the table, trying to adjust to what's going on. And I think their major adjustment they need to make is how effective their hard breach necessarily needs to be. And with the fact that we're now going to this Master Bedroom and Gym site, you're going to need a little bit more than just a pocket hard breach to get the job done. That's why we're seeing an Ace come forward. No Thermite anymore, no exothermic charges to make that really big hole, and they will still have to put a pretty heavy emphasis towards this cache room. This is one of the big favorite parts of actually taking this tertiary objective. Cache room is able to be extended to and hard held, which allows for a higher level of success, and with the new fact that construction only has one hard wall, you can actually reinforce it once and set yourself up to have an extra reinforcement where you can use anywhere else to help you stack up. And actually, I think is going to go ahead and use that on that VIP wall, setting themselves up for maybe a rotation hole if necessary, if they do need to take that step back. Obviously, VIP is of pretty big importance when defending. Yes, that hatch is in that corner, making it a little difficult to defend, but I don't necessarily think there's going to be a big problem for Team Assault to hold on to that. It's a fairly standardized approach towards defense, and yes, while Mystic is a very strong roster, I don't think it's necessarily going to be that difficult when Team Assault have already gone up 2 rounds on them and have looked to see no problem in that process. We already see an attempted push in coming in from this garage side as Gunner's holding on the inside of CCTV. Soft wall. Tones is already seeing it as they go over the Gemini replicator. Gunner's position completely given away and still is going to attempt to peek this position. It does give an interesting sightline towards that garage doorway, but unfortunately, Eddie is nearby. They have the LMGE, a very strong weapon, can still drone out where necessary. And while this does buy pretty dang good time for Team Assault, I don't necessarily anticipate that the time being bought is worth this much to Mystic. They need to start deciding to make a push. They need to start making their objective, but unfortunately, the rotation by this Team Assault defense, where you do have Asian and, of course, Gunner standing down below towards the eastern stairs on the first floor near Secrets, they do have plenty of time and plenty of space to work with to try and set themselves up to, I guess, deny any entry to this garage side, because this cash hold is so successful for any team when it comes to it. Honestly, I refuse to believe that this Master Benjamin Gym side can be considered a tertiary objective anymore. It's too strong, used too often, and it's honestly stronger than the CCTV side, which makes it so much more important. Ashen finds a nade kill all the way over to Felt, removing him from the position, I believe, on the side of Eastern Stairwell. Red steps. Spiff finds one more, this time to Gunner. The extended roam that we saw going forward, now completely fizzling out as Spiff needs to find one more, as there is one near Red Stairs as far as his to believe. And finally, we will see whether or not this last minute and 10 seconds is going to add up for anything for this Mystic attack.
Just got a lot going for him here. Team Assault are slowly being whittled down, and they really need somebody to try to explode back against Mystic. But honestly, with Blast gone and Asian coming through on the flank, his only shot would be to just work these 1v1 fights if he can do it. Coming in from construction, he does have a shield to provide a bit of extra cover, and I think he might just have made it behind the intel net. Catches out Spiff, but now to change his eyes over towards logistics, making sure that nobody sneaks up from behind. Gets out the Iana. Another kill starting to really tally up for the Roni. Asian is making a huge effort. He's only brought it down to within 2 members. Eddie's outside. Poison successful on the case. Oh, but a crucial whiff shot. Asian making sure that he has his gun up. He takes down his former teammate of Poison. 1 versus 1. Eddie has been a hot hand through the 5 rounds of this game, but will he be able to deny it as Asian fakes for the plant? Eddie would have to move if the Zofia just waits too long, but Asian knows that he has to bait this out. He's got to make the decision here, Scott, to just tease it or just go for it fully. Finally, he will stick it. Eddie moves forward, but he's being patient, and Asian baits off, and that might have just done it. He'll have to go for the hop out, and the LMG will stave off a pending 1v5 clutch.
Stick, honestly, in that position, we probably could have seen them stick it. I mean, pros don't fake, right? I mean, they were attempting to tap it occasionally with the timing that it would make the audio queue anyways, and extremely smart idea. That's just great play style anyways, and unfortunately, they could have just stuck it the entire time. As you see, Eddie was holding back. Great trigger discipline from Eddie, which ultimately you see too many times in this game and in other games of the sort like CSGO and Valorant. It can bite you in the rear for being a little bit too patient with that trigger discipline and not jumping the gun to go for the kill. But we obviously saw it work out as they peeked that doorway, kind of forced your player to try and contend against you. And Asian tried to go for the shot and missed it. Then it was forced to go into the run out, and that's where Eddie found success. Waited for that moment and capitalized in quick succession. And that's exactly what you need to see. And that's exactly what Mystic needs to do to win rounds. So obviously heading back to the CCTV and cash and hold. Team Assault did a good job last time around, but I don't necessarily think it was better than what Mystic had brought to the table in their attack. And what we saw last round, where Mystic took Garage in quick fashion, semi-quick fashion, I won't over-exaggerate how swift it was, and took control of Cash Room immediately afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and say it here. Mystic look really strong when it comes to this eastern region of the map. They tend to get flustered out when it comes to the northern side, towards Kitchen on first floor, towards Bar itself even, and ultimately I think that their strongest suit is this eastern edge, and I think the fact that this objective's getting picked up, it may have just been a fluke round to have Team Assault winning on the defense, but it just might be too close to call.
One thing I did mention earlier is this Clubhouse game and the entirety of all 5 maps in the Grand Finals are infinite overtime, and the main reason I bring that up is because, well, I'd honestly be a little bit robbed here, Scott, if we didn't get to see at least one attempt on Bar and Stage. Ah, almost got me there. It's... I think attemptable. It's much easier than bar and stock, where a lot of times in the old version of Club, you just have a bunch of smokes tossed down and the offense would plant with that coverage. Now you actually have a little bit of extra buffer space on sort of the periphery of your setup there. And I'll say in Amateur Siege, sometimes we just don't try new things. It really sucks, but unfortunately that's sort of the way it goes. Here goes Asian, though. Still working on a bit of a flank pseudo-vert extension below, as Team Assault want to make sure Mystic have to kind of push in and make the active decision to seize control. Maxilli dies. He beat something? Maybe it was at the rafters where he got found out from. We'll have to play a game of where's the body, but either way, Maxilli, he sometimes has that tendency to make explosive plays. Hot droning in for Tones as he seizes control of stage, and he looks to clear out what Team Assault still might have brewing down below, and it's successful in that clear, as now he'll pick off JJ as well, which is a crucial nitro cell. Only Gunner is left with that explosive, potentially plant-denying utility, which could be used to catch out Mystic if they try to go for it too much too early. Bandit Trick seems to be decent for Gunner, but it's not really going to matter much, because the rest of his team is slowly falling, and now the Bandit Tricker himself is gone. And it's left up to Felt. Tiny bit of blue on blue there for Feltwinter, but he'll get traded out in the end, so it's not much of a matter.
Yeah, Stig, I hate to say I told you so, but it really does seem that way. I mean, just any angle that was kind of being pushed was kind of just won by Mystic. Even the blue on blue, they technically won that fight. I think they dealt 95% of the damage to their teammate before you actually saw it come up and the other team get the kill. So Mystic were just indomitable. They were impossible to beat in that situation, and I think it's going to kind of follow the same suit when it comes to the other objectives here on defense. But ultimately, I still think CCTV and Gas Room is an objective that's attacker favored. 2 out of the 3 times it showed up was won by the attack. And now I guess Team Assault can kind of show us if they're capable of doing so as well. But the first objective we'll start off on is going to be this church in Arsenal Room down inside basement. And Mystic, with their way that we saw Team Assault play with that very SSG style roam, I think we'll probably see a bit of a replication for that. We are seeing a Maestro come up. And in all honesty here, Stick, Maestro is my favorite operator in the game when it comes to this church defense. They don't even need to stick church. They can go all the way into Arsenal Room, hold behind small and double box, and watch that dirt tunnel, which has been extremely underutilized in recent metas. I think you can agree with me on that aspect. I think there's been too much of a focus when it comes to that central staircase, too much of a focus when it comes to kitchen hatch, which is strong, and I think too much of a centralized focus on that central hallway. We're trying to clear that with sledges, and that's ultimately where we've seen Nitro set off. You see players hiding in VIP like we saw in round 4, and everything just kind of comes to fruition for the defensive side, where they can kind of lie in wait and pounce where necessary, and that's kind of where attacking teams are starting to get flustered. They're starting to fall apart. I think we need to see more dirt-oriented pushes. Yes, it's dangerous, but at this point in time, when you do need to change the meta up, it's something you should probably go for. Ashen sees the opponent's leg and doesn't shoot at all. Instead, takes a step away, and I think that's a smart decision because Asian was quick on the response, and it was very dangerous for both sides. Stick, what do you think as these first 30 seconds pass? What are you going to call for this upcoming round?
Well, I think it's likely to say that there will be a clash between the defense and the offense, or Team Assault are actually able to properly set up for their execute. Tones is just managing to dance around a couple oncoming bullets from Asian. Of course, that LMG, always the pre-fire machine. A couple of Z-pings coming through. Asian will expand his article of angles as Mystic start to recall their defense a little bit closer towards the bomb site. Here goes Feltwinter. He's got a bit of a cutoff in play. The Alibi can't really move inside of Billiards at this moment. You'll see the drone. Feltwinter hops onto it immediately. Gets back off, but the Alibi has managed to escape. And it's all about the time waste for now. Team Assault, if they can't manage to get rid of these defenders without taking a pick, it starts to look a little bit grisly as the round carries on. Feltwinter maybe finally realizing this Alibi neon sign position has drawn back to the side. He will advance forward.
Obviously, you do still have your Alibi, utility to work with. They can buy time and make it so that you have to shoot them out. It does give it audio cue even when being, shot and removed. And that's enough to try to contend with. And putting a player like Ashen on that with the MX4 Storm with the 1.5, an extremely viable weapon now, especially with the 1.5 added on top. And you just see too many players gunning out with their Tress the other day when casting for UPL. Was UPL may have been SFCL? I mean, they were stinking it up on Villa. I mean, they literally got 0 kills for 90% of the game, and then the last 3 rounds with a you know, very good position and good play from the X4 Storm managed to catch up and get themselves a high level of success. But unfortunately, I'll tell you who's not finding success early on, Mystic, as they will take 1 loss to Eddie as they go forward. Gunner has a nade from above looking to toss it, does take a little bit of damage, tosses the nade down, and that player hiding behind the reinforced shield will take that step back knowing what is incoming and will remove any sort of position that allows for this defensive side of Mystic to hold that central hallway, which does allow for this Team Assault to push in from main staircase, work their way through, and maybe take that church wall to gain access. But Mystic are able to turtle up here, Stick. They've got plenty of time to do so. With only 20 seconds left, this last 30-second meta has to be extremely successful, but this is where the smokes on your Thermite will come forward as they start to toss them down. Felt finds one more from above, taking out Poison from the inside church door. The diffuser will start to go down as Blast does find one, but Felt will be denied any chance to place as Spiff drops the Nitro. The second one will be thrown, not enough, and it's not even come down to the post-plant situation as the last 2 kills will ultimately start to fall for Mystic, sorry, not for Mystic, for Team Assault. And we will in fact see round 7, an extremely successful round on this basement attack.
Yeah, that was a bit surprising. Honestly, I was going to mention with the time being so low, 25 seconds in counting, it's fairly risky to just go for that play, but you kind of have to do something. Can't wait forever to make that play. And when it came through, it was, I'd say it was okay for Team Assault. They managed to trade out a couple of those inaugural kills where Mystic are just trying to search for any sort of foothold to repel that execute. But I think ultimately what it really came down to, and the reason why Mystic aren't standing ahead of Team Assault right now, it's got to be that second player who came and picked up the case, and when they heard the rip of the Velcro, they knew the second Nitro was coming, they adjusted their position, they ran for cover, and if that hadn't happened, the round might have been over, just purely off the back that Team Assault weren't able to complete the objective. And be able to be maneuverable like that is something, honestly, the JJ's teams, I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the map veto, sometimes they have trouble with when you're playing against a pug stack, but it seems today, honestly for me, Scott, that Team Assault have got that on lock, and I think that's really promising, because JJ has had a ton of success in comp, but being able to react to the current meta, which is very deathmatch, which is very explosive and constantly changing, I felt was something that he might have trouble with, but perhaps it's the players that he's put on his roster that have been able to smooth over that weakness he's seen in the past.
Yeah, when you ultimately are not necessarily strong in one area, then bring people that can assist you in that part. And I think that's what most teams need to try and focus on. Instead of completely disbanding your roster after one single loss, and a loss that probably doesn't even matter, and completely having to find a new team for the next week and constantly spam LFO on Twitter, instead work with them. Try to fill one player in that spot. Try to work with it in that direction. And that's obviously what I think Team Assault has done a fairly good job. Obviously, like you said, JJ has his flaws and obviously his boons, and is working to try and fulfill those. And you talked about how the meta is pretty explosive. I think I have to agree, but unfortunately, Team Assault, with the ability to pick up Thatcher, instead they're kind of rocking Noah Yana. So their nade potential is a little lackluster. They only have 2 instead of the 4, so the explosive ordnance that you can bring to the table, as John calls it, fragmentation nades, as he likes to say the full word. Only having 2 of those will make it a little bit more difficult for them to find those explosive kills, but it hasn't stopped them just yet, as we did see 1 drop last round and definitely go in their favor, and they're already starting off fairly strong here. Gunner steps up in the opposing side from kitchen closet, steps all the way to main hall and finds one onto Ashen and removes that exposed player, and there's still 1 more in that direction that can definitely work against, but at the current point in time, they're still trying to remove any presence that may be available on the 2nd and 3rd floor before looking downwards and attempting to start this attack in the basement.
Opening pick against the Vigil is certainly going to expedite things, and we saw how Team Assault were even able to be successful in that low time option last round. Now that they've taken out the Vigil, which in turn is going to cause Mystic to kind of be a little bit more skittish. They're going to fall back to the site because they aren't properly equipped to continue on with a roam. Tones has already used his Nitro. You can see the remnants of its explosion there in the corner of the rooftop. meaning Spiff, he's got the only one that's left here, and that could become a bit problematic if we get down to this execute scenario and there's just not enough explosive prowess left to be able to repel the attack when it comes down to the plant stage. A lot of explosive utilities. You mentioned the Iana isn't here. Sledge is, but that's really about it. Hoping that maybe Asian has got a little bit left in pocket. Otherwise, when they go for this drop down, it's going to be up primarily to the EMP grenades of Max to work against that Melusi's Banshee that you can see is just directly below the drop down. Maxilli, I think he did manage to EMP that. It won't matter much as Spiff is holding down the angle in something more pressing, not even, more than this man advantage. It's got to be Eddie coming through on that flank from up above, and Nitro will detonate. It's utter chaos here in round number 8, and Tones will move in with a headshot to confirm this one as the execute. It is a little bit slow on this second go, but it doesn't end up nearly as well as the previous round.
That's something a little shocking considering how well Team Assault started that attack. I mean, they looked strong. They found the opening pick. They knew what they needed to do. They stayed alive. And unfortunately, just time was not on their side. It's kind of that sixth man on the field in favor of Mystic. And it really does favor most attacking teams. They were denied any chance of going for that placement. You obviously saw your Sledge player being required to drop a nade onto the Maestro cams. And it kind of removed the viability of the option for them to try and use it to find a kill. Because the first one had to get rid of the Surya gates placed on Kitchen Hatch. The second one had to get rid of the Maestro meatball cam. And obviously, with none of them left and no other nades across the board, you kind of are a little short-handed when it comes to catching players out of their cramped up turtling positions. And obviously, you need to do so because one of your biggest key points that we've seen them attempt to do in their attack is use those smoke grenades of Blast, JJ on denying sightlines. And it had worked out for them. Yes, they did lose one player towards in round 7. They did lose one player early on attempting to go for the defuse, but they had one immediately there to start it up again. It was not a big point of contention, but they weren't able to necessarily know the position. They just kept tossing the Nitros to default, which is where they were, and that wasn't technically an option for this side of Team Assault, and Mystic knew exactly what they needed to do. They played it well. They did what they were capable of doing, which was just enough to buy themselves time and force Father Time to give them that ultimate win.
Tones is going to attempt this little sort of move forward and pre-fire into the corner trick. There was a player. Maybe, half a second longer if he had waited. That might have moved into a kill space, but you know how siege timing can be. Don't always get the pick, but it is a nice try. Mystic with the score tied. I was going to say that they really performed ahead of expectations in the first half. I love the way that they were able to really kind of move back and forth in that dance with Team Assault, but it seems as though this is kind of just going to be sort of your punch-up game where it's not a matter of stats or sides. The rounds just purely go back and forth, and I think that's best exemplified by how quickly Church Basement turns into a late success for the attack, and then to just an utter smoke show working ahead for the defense. CCTV can be a little bit more one-sided, however. Wall open. No Bandit, no Cade, no Mute being brought by Mystic. They are playing with that understanding that the wall, yes, eventually will get open. And that's, sometimes just the thing that you have to do on this map. But what I'll say, what could be a little bit more pressing is if Spiff misses his impacts there onto the rafters wall, he could easily be pressured and put out of position, most especially if he's being distracted as well. You can just barely see the tracers moving past. Red grenade indicator. He downs Felt, survives the grenade. Somehow the Wamai is still alive and up in this position. It'll expand to a second kill now. He takes out Gunner. As Team Assault, they throw the whole damn book at this position on rafters, but they can't get anything done with it.
Yeah, I mean, in the kitchen sink on top of it. I mean, it is everything they chunked up towards him completely just fizzled out. There was nothing they could do. The nades weren't doing enough damage. The Wamai magnets weren't picking them up anyways, and it wasn't really a big worry for them, and they just didn't do the job they needed to do. And that probably is just because they didn't have enough explosive ordnance. We've already talked about it going forward. They need more, and it just wasn't enough to get the job done. And that's kind of the biggest flaw we've seen right now from Team Assault in the last 2 rounds. They've had what it takes, but they haven't had enough. And ultimately, I think that's the biggest factor. They got open the eastern suburb, the hard CCTV wall, in good time, less than a minute, around a minute's time. and they managed to gain good sightlines towards the objective, but anywhere else they attempted to peek to give them the abilities for crossfires, they lost the one-on-ones. Those 50-50 gunfights they have to be capable of winning, while just dropping in Mystic's favor in a very, very dominant one-sided affair. And obviously, you can't let that happen if you're trying to attack. And if you're Mystic, it's a damn good job for what you did. And they're going to try and hopefully replicate that same level of success, jumping over to a new objective, the Master Bedroom, and of course Jim's side. And we talked about this prior, or at least I did when it was Team Assault's defense. You can still have that extremely excessive roam towards this cash room side, obviously reinforced from cash wall or CCTV, setting themselves up to defend that in good succession. But let's remember how Mystic went for this attack. They put a heavy emphasis and heavy focus on Garage, stepped in from there, and then took control of the Crash almost immediately afterwards, because they were able to remove the one player towards Red Stairs, forcing them to rotate while finding two, one in Rafters and one in Cash Room, to set themselves up for that man advantage lead, which allowed them to ultimately just cascade towards the defense, get the plant, and then fight that one-on-one.
Tones just missing his window there, and that is one little sign of the changes that have come to the way that this map is set up. There's a bit of extra cover over by that construction yard, and you spot the player for a half second, then they move, and now that, potential for an early opening kill from the freezer is gone, and the option is missed. Exothermic will crack on. You've opened up the single panel, which is going to cause a bit of concern for Mystic playing with this setup and their extension. Tones will crack open the stock door. I imagine he was probably thinking somebody was repelled on that east side of sort of the kitchen logistics area. Doesn't find anyone, but Ashen will fill in that same regard. Takes down Gunner. You lose your sledge, and that's the big point that we continue to hit on here, Scott. They have had a couple instances where the explosive utility is lacking. There isn't a Maestro this round, so it would just be up to that bulletproof camera, but it still could be a bit of a problem. If you don't have enough to clear out this shield, if there's issues with an ADS that's placed wrong, or even just the Wamai magnets, that's going to cause a problem, because you only have so much explosives to go around. There will just be the one left for Asian, and he's got to make up his mind. Is it going to be on that shield? Are they going to do it successfully, or will this be a position that stays up for a little longer?
And obviously they're looking to push forward, and they're trying to go for a double-pronged assault. You had seen one player waiting down below, that was Asian, now coming up the staircase. And the great job there to keep Spiff distracted with that double-pronged assault. That's exactly what was necessary. Felt's going to continue the damage going forward, does manage to find Ashen, removing your alibi player with that MX4 Storm, and it looks to be the Team Assault do have control of Cash Room. However, Tones is still down below. They have yet to push inside to guarantee that level of success. Tones is waiting with a Nitro, ready to toss it through Construction Hatch, and I guess waiting for the opportunity to maybe try and get one. That's really all he necessarily has to do. But if I'm Tones, I'd be rotating back to the objective and attempting to turn alone. You can use the Nitro to stop a default plant. Use it in a different position. Instead of praying for the one, which you wouldn't have even gotten as they do run towards Logi, you could have guaranteed a different position. Diffuser player goes. Tones does find it in a different spot with the Nitro, taking out Asian. And unfortunately, Felt, who's all the way stuck on the outside central suburb, has to all the way over to Logi. Does see one CCTV window, finds Poison. A 1v1 now as it's Felt versus Tones. And Tones has set himself up to be back in a position. Stuck inside bathroom, will take the rotation out to the bedroom hallway near Master Bedroom, and ready to step into Jim to maybe catch that sight line, but finally, Felt will pick back up the lunchbox. Diffuser set in stone. Camera gives away Felt's position, is forced to shoot it out. Gets rid of the unfortunate bandit battery that is just in the way of Felt. And Tones steps around the corner with a nice peek, crouched in the process. The Roni's not going to lose that one. Then he will finally see yet another defensive round win. They're starting to set themselves up and separate this distance even further, Stick.
And way to go for the defense there in the 2 versus 3. I love that Nitro that came through from below. That was actually inside the kitchen. A lot of times you'll see that angle used, but it's for the attackers to clear out a Mira. Usually you'll see in that position. Obviously Mira is banned in this instance, but the defense, wow, they just powered up. You always got to worry about a shotgun, especially, the pump action M590 in a position like that. The one was found against the Thermite, but he didn't need to get the second because the Nitro detonated. They knew the play was coming, and it took out that second player, and it brings you back into a situation like that. Feltwinter did a great job to kind of use his game sense to pop up there. Gets the one inside CCTV who tried to peek him. Honestly, to me, Scott, that was a little bit, that was kind of too much there for that defender. I felt like maybe he should have just worked together. But either way, even despite the ability for Feltwinter to pre-aim, he sort of knew where the Mozzie was. It was the crouch, as you mentioned, in tandem with kind of that quick peek around the corner that sent the round forward and ultimately put Mystic onto match point. So, hey, things are looking pretty good for them so far on their pick of Clubhouse. We'll see if they make it happen 7-4 in regulation, or if Team Assault have got a little bit more still left in them.
I think one of the biggest factors we can necessarily talk about when it comes to Mystic being at match point, like you said, the crouching being tainted with gunfights, but really it's just the gunfights as a whole. All the situations where Team Assault need to set up 50-50 gunfights, where they obviously have opened up a big wall, we talked about it earlier for CCTV, they needed a crossfire towards Red Stairs, needed to go for that flank, and it just ultimately failed. And we did see success when it comes to that last objective. We won't see success here for the side of Team Assault, as Ashen just takes him out from the MX4 Storm, even says goodnight, just really dragging that one home to JJ. And a big factor for it is obviously, like I said, those one-on-ones, as I'll continue my point from earlier. We saw Team Assault do good as they kept Spiff distracted and they had Asian come from behind as Fel pushed forward, and that was what they needed to do. But any other engagements have ultimately kind of fell apart, and that's the biggest, weakest link to this Team Assault attack. These lack of chemistry when it comes to a lot of portions. They feel really comfortable playing with each other, but they're not able to fill the gaps that the other ones are leaving enough to stop this unfortunate Mystic defense that are just swinging angles that it doesn't really feel like they have a right to swing, and winning gunfights that should be 50-50 but are just dropping into a 90-10, no, 100-0 at this point in this round. But I mean, come on. At this point, it's just Mystic trying to drag this one home as Ashen cleans up a third, this time under Gunner, and Felt as the last man standing does find Spiff, but still has to face 4 more.
There'll be another round with dire consequences if Feltwinter cannot complete the clutch. This time is against 3. Got a Z-ping coming out. Player rotating above. The Mozzie is ready from inside Wolf. It'll be Felt that steps into the angle, and this time it goes his way against the Roni. But still, multiple defenders from Mystic looking to crack on. Ashen will toss a Prisma. It's a curious play. Drops back, pulled this long angle, and that'll be enough as Ashen makes it into a 4K, hunting for an MVP title early on here in the Unified Premier League Grand Finals. Map number 1, it's a Clubhouse 7-4 to Mystic.
I mean, they looked good. Obviously, the first half, which was much more even, was not necessarily indicative of how Mystic were necessarily wanting this one to play out. And obviously, as that second half came to fruition, they looked to be more of a second half team. They're extremely strong in the defense. Ashen picking up 14. They know the player with 10. I didn't get catch the name before we switched back over. I mean, they looked great. They looked spectacular. There's really nothing that I saw Mystic couldn't do when it came to that. And unfortunately, with the strategy that they have, which is how aggressive they were being, if they just kill Ashen or kill Spiff on that push, then it's probably Team Assault's round. They were just incapable of doing so. When you play that aggressive and that egregious of an assault when it comes to defense, basically playing attack on the defense, well, it can work out for you. But when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And Team Assault were just not able to make the doesn't into a do for them. And that's kind of where everything fizzled out and started to fall apart for them.
So with that in mind, do you see this issue as something that's going to carry forward and potentially still crop up on Coastline?
On Coastline specifically, yeah. I mean, Coastline's a map where Jackal gets almost an immediate ban. You have to remove that player. Honestly, I probably would have started bringing a Jackal on that map on Clubhouse. You needed something to find out those players, and you were incapable of doing so. And it's just going to be even harder now on Coastline. The map's a little thinner, and technically speaking, it may seem to be a little easier in a lot of aspects, but it is a map that is extremely favored towards a strong roam game, and that's something that Mystic was bringing to the table.
All right, well, we'll get some answers to that question. Ahead of us, though, is a short break, so stick with us. We'll be right back. Just got a few things to tend to in the background. Until then, you're watching Unified Premier League here in the Grand Finals.
Welcome back, everybody, to some more UPL action here as we continue our finals for this ultimate matchup. Obviously, Mystic versus Team Assault, and Mystic ultimately took the upper hand in that last map there in Clubhouse with some great assistance in the last few rounds from Spiff and Ashen, who just popped off, just won 50-50 gunfights like I talked about, ended up being 90-10 and taking their team into a very nice sweep of that second half when it came towards playing on the defensive side. But new map, new world, Coastline, I believe, is where we're going to be heading to next. And Stickler brought forward the question of, do I think Mystic is going to be capable of keeping that same presence of that roam game? And I had to agree, but Stickler, let's hear your opinion about that.
Well, the big thing that I'm looking to here in this game has got to be for the kitchen and the service defense. It's not so much about, the fact that you can't plant in the service entrance area anymore. It's got to be the double wall up inside VIP, because you can actually make a legitimate extension upstairs. We're thinking about something Clubhouse-esque, where you've got a hold up above, and you're really causing a lot of problems for the offense in trying to clear that out. There isn't a lot of hard breachers ever brought on a map like Coastline, because you could bring a hard breacher and then have to attack a site like, I don't know, like maybe the double bars where you don't always need one. And sometimes that capitulation can cause issues if you're, maybe you're lacking some grenades, some explosives. We saw that crop up towards the tail end of Clubhouse, particularly for the offense, because they were running into pieces of utility where either there wasn't enough utility, period, or the player who had that utility was accomplishing another task and just was not able to get in position quick enough to be able to use that explosive to shut down some of this defensive extension. And I think that could really be an awesome thing to watch for on this next map, that vertical extension up above. It still can be kind of a problem because you got the penthouse double window, but maybe we're going to see a bit of extra Mira, and I think she could definitely be either a complete and total ban in the veto stage, or she becomes very problematic for the offense throughout this game.
Now, not to like immediately jump it back at you, as we'll jump into the game pretty quickly here. I don't want to toss it immediately back to you, but I do want to bring forward the question: do you think Thatcher was more of a deficit being left unbanned, as teams kind of felt like they were required to pick him up and play him, which kind of forced them to pick up a new kind of meta lineup for their offense, which ultimately left Iana flat out of the board, not to be picked up, and ultimately left them with too little explosives to work with? And I ultimately think that was a big punishing blow for them. It kind of didn't work out for both sides of that aspect, and I kind of wanted to hear your opinion on that as well.
You gotta know when it's the right time to bring the Thatcher, and what I'll say is, what's the alternative? What do you bring when Thatcher is banned? It's the Maverick, and Maverick has grenades, so you have still the same potential to breach open walls. Maybe the Thatcher is a little bit quicker with the way that he does it, but the Maverick brings grenades, and sometimes that's a compromise that you have to think about, and it's one that you should be discussing amongst your team before the game, not during it, not, live in between rounds. Guys, is it time to, bring some more explosives here, or are we just going to keep sticking with the Thatcher? We don't really have to think about that much, as Thatcher is banned here as well. Joining him will be the Nomad, which is definitely a pretty familiar ban on Coastline. Just being able to shut down those rotations with air jabs is a little bit too much. Usually you'll see someone like the Zero come in to replace that, which is actually one that I'm definitely looking forward to. I love a good bit of Zero play. And Thunderbird could be seen as well here, or am I? No, I think because we've elected to ban the Bank, right? The Bank has not came into the pool yet, just because the grand final is on the new patch, but hey, it's the last match of the season. Am I on the money there, Scott?
I think you are. I do believe so. I believe we're still not allowing her at this point. I could be incorrect about that, but honestly, I don't think it necessarily matters, because she's just really not that strong, I would say. I mean, she definitely has viability. I just don't think she's something that really is necessarily a point of contention when bringing up, especially in ban phase for that aspect. But I do think that the Thatcher ban for this map is a little bit strange. It is one of those bans that's not really common. In fact, almost never happens in a lot of aspects, especially in T3 amateur scene. Thatcher just is an operator that's not super useful in Coastline. Nowhere near the same level of utility, I should say, when it comes to other maps. Can still be viable by all get outs. Maybe this is a decision because of, obviously, like you talked about, DJ Wall connecting from VIP, the double wall that is now available, which allows for a level of extension. Maybe that's what they're trying to go for. If you defend VIP, which has been extended as well, a better foothold in the southwest corner of VIP, and if that's what they're trying to go for, I think that's a smart decision. It does actually make it so Thatcher's a little bit more viable, which may not be exactly what Ubisoft was necessarily intending from this patch, because Ubisoft has been someone that is constantly trying to shake and twist up the meta and the average overall pick of who's getting played, and they are pretty terrible at doing so fairly often, I think, obviously with the fact that Zofia is just still a go-to and people are just switching to the LMGE despite the 35 nerfs she has received in the past 5 seasons alone. And I don't think they ever wanted Thatcher to be even further banned and never played, but it definitely is obviously a point of contention we'll have to work out with their Q&A team to figure things out. But obviously, with the round officially starting, no one's gotten spawn peak just yet, so a fairly good start for Mystic, I'd say.
Ooh, but you say that. Look at Maxilly's position here on the main door. Shots come out. That'll be the attacker, Tones, trying to clear out the default camera in lobby. A lot of times you'll see this happen. He does manage to get away with it, and Max fails to capitalize. But what I was going to say for Team Assault, pretty new age setup that they've got here. Immediately deciding to reinforce the DJ wall, and they've also opened a rotation inside of the sort of the hookah drinks area out to the courtyard, which was a couple teams did test that here or there, but now that the changes have been made to the rooftop, it's tougher to get an angle because of that gigantic metal plate. I'm really curious to see what Team Assault can do with this added flexibility in their rotation. It seems like Mystic, though, have kind of beat them to this idea and have just been able to fight them off the roam in a pretty crazy way so far. It'll be closed down there just from the simple angle inside of Hookah as Mystic continue their dominance, I believe. Now with this Hookah pickup, that means 5 rounds in a row that Team Assault have just not been able to get anything done, really.
Yeah, and I think Mystic is kind of the roster that you expect to do strong on the attack. Maybe Clubhouse was a bit of a fluke for them. They did find success, obviously more than Team Assault found on their attack, but I don't necessarily think it's because Team Assault is necessarily bad on the attack. I just think it's Mystic is a very overall strong roster. In all honesty, they're unprecedented in my mind when it comes to winning engagements and playing strategically, and that's something that is a little less obvious in recent times, obviously with the pickup of Ashen, who has been a gunner through and through to the very end by all accounts, and obviously your age-old Spiff and Poison just do a great job with utility and playing where they need to do. This roster is fleshed out, and I don't anticipate them to find too many losses when it comes to this map, but obviously when the defensive switch has to go forward, it's going to be an entirely new beast, and obviously with this new kitchen rework that kind of was adjusted and worked towards, with kitchen service not being able to be planted inside Falcon, you actually have to step all the way through. Me and John, fellow John Commentary, worked through and found a lot of peak holes for this penthouse room, which does allow for you to, like you said, do that extension to the second floor, defend VIP, defend penthouse, and play the floor game, play the long con with that verticality and try to use it against your opponents and ultimately stop them from going for that plant, because that default position, the new default as I would categorize it on the southern edge as soon as you step into kitchen service, is directly in a sight line for the opponents to shoot from penthouse. It is almost impossible to stop it from above, and that just makes kitchen service a very unlikely objective in my mind to be pushed. Unfortunately, it's probably still the stronger of the two to actually go for.
Well, let's get an idea of if Mystic are ahead of the curve. Still some setup going on. Ashen checking in on his camera feed. Smoke, if he lingers around here for too long, could get found out. Ashen will go for a quick tap in through the window, showing another one of these changes, removing those dastardly jail bars that were the foe of so many winnable engagements. Tones appearing.
You sound like you have some experience with that.
Oh yeah, no, those bars are always costing me my elo. And Tones. Looks like just a creep up from Gunner, walks right up the Cool Vibe stairs, but Smith will respond with a trade in kind against Maxilly. Though, Mystic still, it's tough to find the centerpiece of what their next objective is going to be. It feels like maybe they wanted to clear the top floor, and now they've lost their Iana, so droning becomes a bit more difficult. You have also Eddie, who's actually worked into security. Could pressure maybe some rotation from the lobby as well, though now with Ashen moving into Sunrise, I have a feeling this isn't really going to be a full clear of the upstairs. Maybe what they intend to do is push in for a kitchen plant, perhaps somewhere close to Pangu or First Aid, and then hope that maybe Team Assault don't have the most of those angles that you mentioned set up above. But I don't know. It doesn't look like they're really in much of a drought when it comes to those vertical sight lines. And now as Spiff has found out as well here, Scott, to be honest with you, Mystic kind of just have to make something happen.
Yeah, they're looking to do just that, and the LMGE is going to do it first with Eddie taking out JJ, and Ashen, like I had spoken about earlier and highlighted, will take out Asian. Unfortunately, Felt's going to drop down White Stairs, not going to matter too much longer as Eddie finds yet another, but unfortunately for the side of Mystic, Gunner's finding 2 onto Eddie and Ashen, just Poison left standing, the ex-Kairos pellet-wielding Habana player, and really hoping to try and contend for Dustbot and behind Reinforced Shield, a dangerous position as they're trapped inside Kitchen. Those unfortunate walls that have not actually been reinforced does make it difficult for both sides to try and contend, as you do see a Nitro goes off as the retinas of your player have been slightly removed, and you do see Poison has a sightline, can't run for it just yet, tossing flashes, still to work with, but Gunner, who I believe was actually blind, still finds the kill, laughing his whole way to the bank, and still gets the job done. An absolute showcase of what flashes can do in this day and age, completely looking in the opposite direction, but geez, I mean, Team Assault narrowly escaping as that gameplay advantage comes forward with that Roni.
Yeah, I'll say that is a certified Callum Keegan moment. He saw the whole body of the Mozzie when he first peeked in from jungle. Callum, just shoot him, man. Just shoot him. What are you doing? He's up on the kitchen counter looking for the angle, and then the flashbang? How? Gunner, how in my mind does he do that?
Pray.
Unbelievable.
Is this one of those moments where you're just like, you're sitting there like, there's no way this is happening, and then it just happens? There's just no words. You just can't do anything about it. Speechless, I think, is technically the term for it, but as casters, that's kind of like the worst thing we can be, I guess. So, you know, we try to avoid speechlessness and not talking and trying to fix things. Obviously, with Team Assault taking that last round, they're going to be heading over to this Billiards and Hookah objective in hopes to try and contend against this. Obviously, Double Bar didn't really get any changes when it came to this update. It wasn't a huge factor to try and deal with, so you don't really need to play that. Obviously, they can just head right back to Hookah and Billiards, and I think that's a smarter decision. There was a change for the bomb inside of Billiards to be moved and shifted north a little bit. I actually think that was reverted, as me and John had actually looked at it, and then it was not the same way when we casted it just later.